From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 574. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, this episode is actually going live on April 1st, but we promise not to fool anyone with what we have to say. So, with that being said, please tip us off.
Yeah, this episode is centered around a topic suggestion from loyal NLSC podcast listener Renee, where he wanted us to answer questions from the community, and those questions do not need to be basketball related. So, Andrew, at the end of last week's show, you stated that, a Q&A makes you feel, like a celebrity
A little bit.
And whatnot. So I know that you're going to enjoy this episode quite a bit. So let's get right into the questions. Live 01 legend Roger Ward asks, do you ever run zone defenses on the virtual hardwood? And Andrew, honestly, I can't stand zone. In the words of Mark Jackson, hand down, man down. In the words of so many true hoopers out there, man up. I love the challenge of playing defense one-on-one in both real life and in video games. I can't stand when teams I play on want to play zone or even hint at it. I feel like in most cases it's admitting that your team is inferior defensively, that you can't guard the other team on a man-to-man basis. And this goes for, college basketball games as well. I won't use zone.
Yeah, I feel the same. I don't enjoy it as much. It doesn't feel as fun. Doesn't feel as active. I like guarding the ball handler. Sometimes I will play off ball. Oftentimes when we play in a lot of games, I will play off ball. I will defend on ball sometimes, but I try and defend the paint, defend a big man down low, so I'm not getting beaten as much off the dribble thanks to my lousy connection. But even playing solo when I have absolutely no lag, it's just not as fun to play zone.
Yeah, I will say that there is a strategic element that can be used in video games at times and in times in real life, even though I hate it. When I connected with WizCard Rush on NCAA Basketball 10, I was using Georgetown, and that Georgetown team is good inside and suspect from behind the three-point line, right? And he didn't run zone in the first half, and I was blowing him out, right? I was getting dunks constantly. I was overpowering him inside, etc. Then he switched to zone in the second half, and because my team isn't strong on the perimeter, shooting the rock and whatnot, they're not that great from downtown, and my team isn't super fast. He was able to kind of play on par with me in the second half and even, make a small run. And that was because he switched into a 2-3. So I understand the strategic side of it.
Definitely.
In real life and in video games, but I just stay away from it as often as possible.
As I said, just not as fun.
T Gentry at Bucky T asks, favorite foods and what non-basketball video games do you play? So we'll start off with favorite foods, Andrew. For me, cheeseburgers. I love a good cheeseburger. Before we recorded this episode, I had a cheeseburger from probably one of the best burger restaurants in town, and it was absolutely delicious. I also love extra cheese pizza and soft tacos. My favorite dessert is tiramisu.
Yeah, it's funny, we talk about how much we have in common. I love a soft taco as well. One of my absolute favorites. Enchiladas as well. Spaghetti bolognese. It's actually kind of a joke in my family. For Christmas, my special Christmas dinner is often spaghetti bolognese. I'm not a big fan of a roast dinner, so I actually have spaghetti as my special Christmas meal with the family every year. Also love a good burger as well, and funnily enough, cheese pizza is also my favorite. So once again, we have a lot in common, as we've discovered over the years. As for dessert, love a good chocolate mousse, but also a Boston mud cake, which, not sure what it's called over there, might be something very different, but it's basically a very rich chocolate cake.
See, I try to stay away from that most of the time. Not a huge fan of, rich chocolate cake, but I see the draw, and it is delicious, so I get it. What do you put on your burgers?
So I will just go with a fairly easy burger of lettuce, cheese, tomato sauce, ketchup, as you call it. I'm pretty simple with that. If I'm getting takeaway, eating at a good burger place might go a bit more exotic. But yeah, a simple burger really hits the spot.
Yeah, for me, lettuce and tomato. Non-basketball games I play. So I'm going to go with right now. So like, what are we playing right now? So my brother and I are playing Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Wilds, which is the newest Monster Hunter game, Remnant 2. We already beat Remnant from the Ashes, which came out before it. Strangers of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, and yeah, those are the ones we're super into right now. We also, from time to time, put on Hellpoint, Helldivers 2, and Elden Ring. But what you'll notice about all of those games is that they're online co-op. And I've talked about our setup in the past. Basically, what we have in the living room is two 50-inch TVs next to each other, two computers, and they're both plugged in to the internet via LAN. And we connect on all of these games online co-op, and it's an absolute blast, and we're sitting in the same room, right? And just hundreds of thousands of hours enjoying this type of setup. I'll also point out that we also like some good side-scroller co-op action. So we play games from the Contra series, Rayman series, a game like Unruly Heroes, etc. There's actually quite a few good side-scrollers out there. Whether it's classics or, indie titles, et cetera, on Steam. So we get our fix with those from time to time as well.
You posted in the Discord the new Terminator game. That looks pretty cool as far as side-scrollers go.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet. I think that was an announcement of, talking about a release date and showing previews and whatnot. Yeah, but that looks like it might be fun.
Yeah.
Right? And, that's something I was thinking about the other day was you and I could connect on some of these games.
Oh, definitely.
It might be cool to jump on something that's not a basketball game with you, whether it be a classic or like a newer title.
Oh, definitely. And to the point of this question, yes, we do play other games as well. Actually picked up a new point-and-click adventure game, The Phantom Fellows, over Christmas, and looking forward to getting to that. I was a big point-and-click adventure, and also the typing adventure, the Sierra, Leisure Suit Larry games back in the day. So looking forward to throwing it back with a very retro-inspired point-and-click adventure there. Looks like it has a pretty interesting story and concept. So yeah, looking forward to diving into it. I like to go back to Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, obviously. Also Fallout 4, it's not my favorite in the series. 3 in New Vegas, just absolutely fell in love with those games back in the day. People can talk about how their graphics don't hold up. Well, look at me, Derek. I'm a retro basketball gamer as well. You know that I don't need cutting-edge graphics to have a good time if I'm enjoying the gameplay, enjoying the whole experience of what I'm playing. So those are still always going to be in the rotation. I love to replay through an adventure game every so often as well, even though I've played through them and beaten them and solved them so many times. Always fun to go back to and experience the story again and see if I can 100% them with the point system back in the day. And also, a classic platformer, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario Brothers. Still enjoy playing those.
Yeah. So I didn't mention games that I play solo because I usually try to play co-op, right? That's the ultimate experience for me, co-op or against, a shared experience with another human. But as far as, games I play solo, I posted in the Discord today in the other game section, snippets from Devil May Cry 5, right? I love the Devil May Cry series. I've beaten a few of the past titles. I love the fact that they stuck to the formula with the newest Devil May Cry game. And that game's awesome. I play Castlevania games solo. That's one of my favorite series, whether it be the Lord of Shadow games or the classics from NES and Super Nintendo. Not N64. The N64 one was not a great game.
No.
But but yeah, not a strong title. But yeah, as far as the classics like Donkey Kong Country, Contra, games like that, like I still play those solo from time to time, and they're a lot of fun.
And I'll also throw out there the WWE games, wrestling games. I'm a pro wrestling fan, as I've mentioned before. And another one that I'll mention, Sid Meier's Pirates, all 3 versions basically. But Pirates Gold for PC is probably my favorite. Spent the most time with that one back in the 90s. A strategy game where you are a pirate sailing around the Caribbean and plundering ships and plundering towns, capturing ships. installing governors, getting titles of nobility, and basically making a fortune as a pirate/privateer/buccaneer in the Spanish Main. Very fun strategy game back in the day. There's been some other pirate games over the years, but none of them really come close to Sid Meier's games.
Next question is from Houston TX224. He asks, what are your top 5 favorite original Xbox games? So it's pretty straightforward for me. NBA Live 2003, NBA Inside Drive 2002 through 2004. So that's 4 games total right there. And Project Gotham Racing, so my only non-basketball game. My friend Craig and I, he was also on the basketball team with me in high school, we spent a ton of time on Project Gotham Racing, late night eating chips with salsa con queso and drinking a pack of Code Red Mountain Dew. That was the staple to some of our nights. But yeah, for me, it's 4 basketball games and Project Gotham Racing.
So I've actually never played an original Xbox. I didn't own one growing up. None of my friends had one. We all had other consoles, PS2 mostly. So I suppose by default, my favorite Xbox games would also be the ones that were out on PS2 as well. The NBA Lives of the time, and also Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto is a game that I didn't mention with other games I play, but that is another game that I play. I've been playing the Definitive Edition on PC. They've polished that up. It was a bit of a disaster at release, but they have patched that nicely, and it's working pretty well, at least in my experience. So I suppose, yeah, that generation of GTA and NBA Live by default.
Yeah, NBA Live 2003 was such a big deal when it came out, wasn't it?
I
remember... Yeah, with the right stick dribbling. I remember my friend Craig and I throwing that on, for the first time together, and I put the Kings on the floor, and I'm out there with Chris Webber in the high post, like holding the ball out in front of me, right? Holding it behind me, using that right stick and executing quick first step moves, and using Mike Bibby on the perimeter to cross over and all of that stuff. And I just was blown away by the control we had in that game. But yeah, that was, I would say that the first game that I ever played though on Xbox was NBA Inside Drive 2002. And I still think that that's a super strong game.
I want to play that one a little bit more. I did pick it up for $5 on eBay because it was listed on the backwards compatibility list for Xbox 360, but for whatever reason, just doesn't work on my 360. Even with the original hard drive, says that it's not compatible despite being on the list. So emulation it is.
Kid Cash asks, for D, top 5 favorite Celtics, followed by the top 5 Celtics you couldn't wait to get rid of. So obviously, I was a huge Celtics fan, for most of my life. So my favorites list is actually pretty long, but I narrowed it down to 8. So I couldn't just do top 5. I chose 8 players. So D Brown. D Brown is the reason my name is D for 3 on social media. It's the reason my family calls me D. So my brothers call me D, etc. And it's because, during the dunk contest, that he competed in and won in 1991, I was just so excited. I was like, you guys, I want you to call me D moving forward. And it works out because my first name is Derek, so it's fitting. But the whole reason why I asked them to call me that is because of D Brown. Second is Dino Raja, who I think is a lot better than he gets credit for, as it relates to his basketball career and his short stint with the Celtics. I wish he had stayed with us a little bit longer, but I loved his post game, his face up game. Just loved his footwork. I just thought he was a really smart and capable player. Tony Battie. Tony Battie, I love those lob threats. You know that, Andrew. You know it from connecting with me on video games. I love the fact that Battie was always available for the lob. He was good at hanging around the rim and throwing it down two-handed or catching oops. He also, could hit that mid-range jumper. And I just love it that he had the same demeanor in every single game, kind of like in the way Robert Parrish did, as far as he was all business. I love the way he represented the Celtics when he was with us. Reggie Lewis, who was basically emotionless when he played for the most part. He was all business as well. He I loved his game. I loved his jump shot. I actually think he shot very similar form-wise to Kevin Durant. And I did a side-by-side comparison at one point on Twitter for that, and people were agreeing. They're like, wow, their shots are incredibly similar. He also could, slash, and, he was a really good defender, famously blocking Jordan multiple times, long arms, quick hands, etc. Loved Reggie Lewis. Dana Barros didn't exactly pan out for the Celtics the way we wanted. He was coming off a 20-point season with Philadelphia where he was an all-star, and we thought we were getting an all-star, right? But I don't even think he averaged more than 13 at his peak with the Celtics. We didn't know where to put him when he was on the team. Was he a shooting guard? Was he a point guard? Could we fit him in as a combo guard? Could he be on a winning playoff team, etc.? But I just loved his shot, just beautiful shooting form, strong player, and was a big fan of Barros. Andrew DeClercq was all hustle, right? 50-50 balls. He would get them. He was always around the rim, creating chaos and whatnot. And I loved him for that. Brandon Bass, that mid-range jumper, always elevated on it. I always thought it was going to go in. I honestly thought he would hit 100% of his mid-range jumpers, Andrew. Just loved the look of his shot. Usually when he hit it, it splashed. It didn't hit any rim. I also like the fact that he was an excellent athlete and was really good at operating out of that high post and slashing and throwing it down and whatnot. And I think he provided a lot of value on the defensive end. And then lastly, Taco Fall, who I can't believe he's not in the NBA because he showed flashes of brilliance, at that 7'5" height. He just looked like a monster at times, and his per 36 minute stats for a while were absolutely nuts. I felt like he had quick feet for 7'5". I thought that he ran the floor well. I mean, he had moves that were pretty robotic inside, but when he went straight up, he was pretty damn effective. So Taco Fall, really enjoyed watching him as well. But yeah, those are probably my favorites, Andrew. But as far as like Celtics that I couldn't wait for the organization to get rid of, I don't really have any names that stand out, but there have been players in the past who just acted kind of like they didn't want to be there, right? And I'm going to give one example, and I'm not saying that I have a problem with him, but it always felt like he had his 1 foot out the door, Stephon Marbury, right? Didn't really feel like he wanted to be a Celtic. And any player, because back then I didn't miss a game. I was watching every single game of the season, playoffs, preseason, any game I possibly could. Any player that just didn't give it his all on the court, any player that failed to like truly improve or adapt, etc. A player that just had that air about them where it was like they could care less if they were playing with the Celtics or for the Clippers, right? It didn't matter. Like they didn't want to be a Celtic, basically. Those are the players that I wanted out.
Yeah, that was a weird reunion, wasn't it? KG and Marbury, Celtics in 2009. And yeah, it didn't really seem like he wanted to be there. He wanted to be on an NBA team, wanted to be on an NBA team that could contend, and the Celtics were the defending champions, obviously. But yeah, even though Marbury seemed to have something left in the tank, just didn't have the right attitude with that stint. And of course, I remember Dana Barros joining the Celtics as I was really getting into the NBA and playing for them for a few years. Also had a return stint, a one-game stint with them in the 2004 season, signing on very late, and then another game in the playoffs. Retired a Celtic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was a hometown kid, right? Like Dana Barros, I think he was where he belonged. Right. I think it made sense for him to finish his career with Boston. I do wish that it had gone differently because I do think that he was a very capable player, and he proved that in that All-Star season with Philadelphia. So Kid Cash, Andrew, also asked, for Andrew, growing up being a basketball fan, did you ever feel jealous and or left out by not living in America and being able to experience the game at a different level?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Look, I am proud to be Australian. I love my country. But when you are a basketball fan in Australia, it's not the easiest. Access is not the same, obviously, as the US. You're on the other side of the world. It's not like you can just take a domestic flight to attend a game, or indeed, if you are in a city with an NBA team, attend a game quite readily. you don't have the same access as far as so much of it being on TV, especially free-to-air TV, network TV. For a while there, the NBA wasn't on free-to-air, so I was getting DVDs and VHSs from Pontel a couple of weeks after the fact, had a subscription to them. That was a lot of fun. I'm kind of nostalgic for that, but at the same time, it's not as good as being able to watch games live on TV. Then I did get pay TV, Foxtel, in 2004, and was able to really indulge my love of basketball again and watch several games a week and the All-Star Game and the playoffs live. That was fantastic. And of course, some of the video games you don't get in PAL regions. You may be able to import them if you have a modded console, or with PlayStation 3 was region-free, of course. You just import those games and they'd work automatically. But yeah, there's definitely that disconnection living in Australia following the NBA. And yeah, a little bit of jealousy, I suppose, being able to have that much access, go to games, obviously. I've not been to an NBA game. Would have loved to have gone to a Bulls game back in the day, back in the 90s, of course. I'd still love to go to a Bulls game today. As I said before, I'm not the biggest fan of the NBA style at the moment, but still having that experience, being able to be in the United Center, watching the Bulls live would still be fantastic, especially if they had a game like they did against the Lakers the other day, last week, when Josh Giddey hit that incredible game winner from half court over LeBron. So I'd still enjoy it. I'd still enjoy the experience, getting to see the Michael Jordan statue, etc. But yeah, it certainly is tougher to follow the NBA when you're not in America, or Canada for that matter. Had the games, had the trading cards, had the magazines, had some access on TV. We had a sports recap show on Channel 10 back in the day. Sports Tonight might still be going, not sure. Don't watch free-to-air anymore. But you'd be staying up late to watch that show and hope that there was a snippet of the NBA. They certainly would during the playoffs. But yeah, certainly there's not as much access. So yeah, a little bit of jealousy there.
It's a little bit better for you now, though, at the height of access, right? The height of social media.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a lot easier to follow the NBA, right? The ongoing happenings, looking up information, catching clips of games. It was definitely harder, obviously, for you, growing up. I've been to over a dozen Celtics games in my life, and that's the only team I've ever seen, actually, live, whether it be going to a game at the Fleet Center or going to a game at TD Bank North Garden and then going to a game at TD Garden. I would say that one of the best games that I've ever been to is a game where Kobe dropped, I want to say 50 on the Celtics. I saw that live up close. That was something. And there was another game where I watched the Celtics play the Raptors, and Mike James went off, and he looked amazing in person. I couldn't believe how quick he was, how great his dribble was, how quick his shot was, how built he was as an athlete. Mike James was unbelievably. Mike James is one of the most impressive players that I've ever seen. I think when I went and saw him in person, it was the 05-06 season, which I think was the best season that he had in the NBA and the Raptors. Right. Just super impressive. One of the funniest experiences, but also one of the most telling was one that I talked about on a prior show where I saw a preseason game with the Celtics and Mike Sweetney was trying to make the roster. And he was the biggest man I've ever seen on a basketball court. He was so big and wide and whatnot, but so light-footed. And it just told me that even these players trying to make it back to the league, even the worst NBA players and even the players that look the most out of shape, those guys are just incredible athletes and incredible players. I wish he had made the roster because he looked almost unstoppable at points out there because of that size and the fact that he was so light-footed at that size. I'd say probably the worst Celtics game I've ever been to was the most recent. It was actually when Kyrie was with the Celtics and they were playing against the Orlando Magic, and it's a game I took my grandfather to. And he hadn't been to a Celtics game since the 80s and whatnot. And my God, there were so many distractions. The music was so loud. There were more breaks in the action than actual basketball. The quality of the on-court product was basically piss poor. It wasn't an entertaining game at all. But yeah, super blah experience going to that game. Oh, correction. That was the second to last game that I've seen. The last game I saw was actually Celtics versus Golden State, and they did like a Kobe tribute video, I believe, before the game. And that game was also one of the worst games that I've seen. Curry was not playing. That's the game where I was watching Draymond Green shoot around and he took about 7 to 8 mid-range jumpers or something and like bricked all of them. I'm like, this guy looks absolutely horrible even when he's just shooting around. It's a game where D'Angelo Russell was on the Warriors and he was just jacking up the dumbest shots and playing so stupid in that game. And the best looking players in that game were actually Marcus Smart on the Celtics and Jaylen Brown. But yeah, that also was kind of a piss poor on-court experience. That wasn't a really fun game to go to.
Yeah, that'd be my fear, going to a game finally and it's not a very good one. Although, for me, it would still be the experience of getting to go there and hopefully being in Chicago, hopefully seeing the Bulls and hopefully seeing a highlight or two, and again, just being in the arena and enjoying finally seeing an NBA game live. Hopefully that would outweigh any rough moments from the current style of play in the NBA. Of course, I do want to do a proper American vacation. The only time I've been overseas, Derek, is when EA Sports has paid me to either attend the studio or attend the draft, and we did the event in the hotel in New York in 2007 for NBA Live 08. I want to do a proper trip where I'm actually sightseeing and see a game and see the Hall of Fame.
I've been to the Hall of Fame once, and it was awesome. Shooting on the court there was fantastic. At the time, Vinny Del Negro's son was actually working at the Hall of Fame.
Cool.
And I talked to him for a little bit. But yeah, I'd love to go again as well.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at NBA-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
The cyber athlete asks, is Tom Chambers a Hall of Famer? And why is the answer yes? And yes, I 100% agree. I think Tom Chambers is a Hall of Famer. And I want to give examples of players that made the Hall of Fame that you can't really say had truly better careers than Tom Chambers, but they're in a lot because of the nostalgia around them, because of their potential. Maybe they got hurt, stuff like that. So, like, did Penny Hardaway really have a better career than Tom Chambers? Right? Did Grant Hill technically have a better career than Tom Chambers in the NBA? It's questionable if T-Mac even did, because of how long he played and the limited prime that he, had before his injuries. And then even somebody like Vlade Divac is in the Hall of Fame. And obviously, not just because of his NBA play, but at the end of the day, is Vlade Divac more deserving of the Hall of Fame than Tom Chambers? So Chambers peaked at about 27 points per game, 6'10", 220 pounds, probably weighed a little bit more than that as he got older and put on muscle and whatnot. But obviously, and a tremendous athlete, he could stretch the floor, could hit the three and whatnot. Obviously, an incredible athlete. We all remember the dunk on Mark Jackson, which was famous and actually represented in video games in the early 90s and whatnot. And he actually had a very long NBA career, including on some many good teams, whether it was for Phoenix or Seattle. And even in late stage of his career, he was on some good Utah teams. Obviously famous for a 60-point game with the Suns versus Seattle. And in that game, Andrew, he went 22 for 32 from the floor and had 60 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal. But yeah, could light it up, had great size, great athlete, great success in the NBA. I think it's a no-brainer that Tom Chambers is a Hall of Famer.
And the cool story where he was a replacement in the 1987 All-Star game, getting the start and then getting the MVP, and the game was in Seattle, of course, so a nice story there, but not just a pity vote. He was a fantastic player, as you said. Kind of interesting that we look at him as an 80s player, and I've brought this up before. Him and Xavier McDaniel, good examples of this, where you think of them as 80s players, but they were still there in the 90s. They were still there as late as 1998. Tom Chambers had that one game for the 76ers to finish his career in the 98 season. Xavier McDaniel as well with the Nets till about halfway through the year when they released him. But we think of these players as 80s players, but they were still playing towards the turn of the millennium. So just one of those weird things, I guess. But yeah, a fantastic player. When you talk about the players who are in the Hall of Fame that didn't necessarily have better careers overall, and people get kind of funny about the Hall of Fame and say, oh, it's too easy to get in, and they've got players who don't deserve to be there. And certainly we can debate that, but it's not like they're putting Greg Ostertag in the Hall of Fame. They're not putting Jamie Watson in the Hall of Fame. A couple of Utah Jazz legends there. Shout out to Josh and Dave from Namo Gamo. So it's not like they're putting scrubs or role players in the Hall of Fame like that. So yeah, in no way would it be inappropriate to put Tom Chambers in the Hall of Fame. So I absolutely agree with him going in there.
Some wild stuff about longevity when you think about it. Like, Tom Chambers came into the league in 1981 with the San Diego Clippers. And in those early 80s, he actually played with Bill Walton, right? And then you fast forward to the late 90s, and he gets a game in with the Philadelphia 76ers in 97, 98, and he played with Allen Iverson. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the funny thing about longevity. It shows, how long these players played and how durable they were as athletes.
Terry Cummings is another one that you think of as being that 80s player, but he was there right to the end of the 90s.
Yeah, and Terry Cummings was also on that Clippers team.
Exactly.
Right, with Bill Walton and Tom Chambers. And Cummings is also a Hall of Fame talent, and he had an incredible career. And, you talk about some of the most versatile power forwards of all time. He has to be right up there. Stasho Bro at Nate Stasho, so the other Live 01 legend, asks, what's the cheesiest moves or strategies you use in NBA video games? And then he states, what's the cheesiest thing you do to beat the AI on the hardest difficulties? So this one's a tough one, but I'm going to relate this question to 2K. Cheesiest moves or strategies, going wide on NBA 2K14 to present 2Ks, or drop stepping on 2K games where it's incredibly dominant. If I find myself in a tough situation where I need a bucket and I can dribble up the court and go wide on an AI defender, I will do it. And I will score because help defense doesn't come over, and oftentimes you can just blow by that guy on the wings. And we've talked about the dominant drop step, right? It's very dominant in 2K17 to present. They buffed it a little bit in 2K25, which I thought was nice, so it's not so dominant, but it's still pretty damn effective. But yeah, 2K17 to present has been mostly pretpretty dominant as far as that drop step goes.
So you know what immediately comes to mind for me, Derek, is Freestyle Superstars in NBA Live 06. When all else fails, spam those moves. When you have an outside scorer, you ironically go inside with them, use that layup, either the behind the back or the up and under, and that is very high percentage. When that stops working, or when the CPU manages to block those shots, you know that the comeback logic is really kicking in. The AI is not playing fair at that point, because that is a very cheesy move. Also, in a lot of NBA Lives of that generation, getting a big man under the hoop and then just hitting dunk layup, going for that reverse layup under the hoop, very effective. Remember having some big games with Chris Wilcox. Of course, you remember Chris Wilcox was a great video game player because he could just get inside and just dunk over everybody or hit that reverse layup in NBA Live. So when all else fails, get it to the big man down low and use one of those cheesy moves. And I suppose in general, I like to play that realistic style, Derek. I like to mix it up. I like to run a few plays. I like to take those mid-range shots when they're there. If I really need a bucket, though, I'm just pounding it inside. Just going inside as much as possible in any game where you can score easily in the paint. I'm going to throw that very strategy out the window, the realism out the window to a certain extent, and just try and get every bucket at the hoop, because if the CPU is not playing fair, then I'm not going to play fair either.
Yeah, you just made me think of a couple other things. First off, NBA Live 2004 jump stops.
Yes.
Right? You're in a bind and you want to get to the hoop, jump through the defense with the NBA Live 2004 jump stop, and more than likely you'll at least have a good chance at scoring. They fixed that with Live 2005 and Live '06. However, it's super dominant in Live 2004.
Added a slider too. Also, that helps.
Yeah. Also, a thing that I take advantage of with humans and with the CPU at times is that inbound steal. There's certain games that it's much easier to get inbound steals on. One of them is NBA Live 2005. And if it's something that I wouldn't normally do during the game in the flow of a game, but then now it's a close game and I need to get a steal and whatnot, or I'm trying to make a comeback and there's like 5 minutes to go, you can bet I'm going to bring a quick player, normally a guard, up to the out of bounds line, and I'm going to try to get that cheap inbound steal on you. The other thing too is when you play games like NBA Live 2000, the earlier 2Ks, etc., and even like the 2Ks from like the early 2010s and whatnot. Like you said, get it to the big man, right? You get it to a super tall player under the hoop, and you can make a guy like, I don't know, Sean Bradley score 40 points, right? You can make a guy, we talked about it before, Hashim Thabit, I can make him look like Wilt Chamberlain out there in certain games and whatnot. So I think that's kind of a cheap strategy, taking advantage of the game's mechanics, using a player that is normally not that great offensively in real life and turning him into an absolute menace, like an absolute superstar. He also asks, cheesiest thing we do to beat the CPU on the hardest level. And honestly, it's a lot of the same things I mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no real difference there for me.
And you also reminded me with the inbound steals, NBA Live 95 PC, if you can position your defender properly in front of the inbounder, they'll either throw it out of bounds 9 times out of 10, or they'll try a bounce pass to get under you, but they'll bounce pass out of bounds, turning it over. So there's a couple of ways of getting a cheap turnover on the inbounds against the CPU there.
Roger Ward, Live 01 Legend, asks, what are your top 3 games outside of basketball video games? I'd say right now, probably Remnant from the Ashes or Remnant 2, because we're more playing Remnant 2 now because we technically beat the other one. Monster Hunter World and Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. All of those are online co-op games that my brother and I are playing together.
So I'll do top 3 all time, and I'll say Sid Meier's Pirates. It's difficult to say which version. I discovered the original version on NES, although I think it came out on Commodore and IBM PC first. Also, as I said, love Pirates Gold. Probably my pick for the favourite out of the 3 versions, but the 2004 reboot was also spectacular. I'll also say Donkey Kong Country 2. I know that's a controversial pick for you because it's a game called Donkey Kong Country and it doesn't have Donkey Kong playable in it, but I do love the level design, love all the gimmick levels, love all the collectibles in that game. And then probably a tie between Fallout 3 and New Vegas. It's difficult to say which is my favourite. Kind of depends on the day. Love the story in both. Play very much the same way, same engine, obviously. So there's a lot of overlap with them. But yeah, I'll have to go with a tie there as well.
And the last response on Twitter, ChuckLA92 asks, what are our top 3 basketball movies? So for me, the top 2 are pretty easy. Number 1 is White Men Can't Jump. Like I stated on a prior show, that was the ultimate pump-up movie for myself. Growing up, it was on either HBO or Showtime constantly, and whenever it was on, I would put it on, and it would make me want to go out and play on the blacktop. It would make me want to either play in the driveway with friends or go to one of the local parks, and maybe even want to put money on the games and whatnot, which we did not. But it was just everything. That movie was just everything that you wanted out of a pickup hoops movie. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Blue Chips with Nick Nolte, Shaq, Penny Hardaway, etc. Love that movie. And number 3, it's a tie between 3 movies, actually. It's a tie between He Got Game, Hoosiers, and Coach Carter.
So yeah, 2 of those are in my top 3 as well. White Men Can't Jump, for all the reasons you said. Blue Chips, I actually saw that a few years after it came out, renting it in the school holidays once when my cousin Clinton was here, really enjoying seeing that movie finally. Just really enjoyed the story, enjoyed the basketball action. Quite frankly, the snippets of basketball action, great humour. Al Bundy's in that movie, Ed O'Neill. It was Al Bundy from Married with Children, so some fun.
So was Bob Cousy.
Yeah, some fun cameos as well. Yeah. Bob Cousy making all those free throws. Apparently that was unscripted. That was a bit of an ad-lib there with Nick Nolte, Do You Ever Miss? Well, at least that's what I've heard. That was an ad-lib. So that was cool to see Bob Cousy in that movie as well. And look, it's a total fanboy pick. We're going to say Space Jam. That was an iconic movie for me as a kid. And yeah, I don't care what anybody says. I love that movie.
Yeah, that could be tied for number 3 on my list as well. I watched it again recently, and it's as good as I remembered. So yeah, I definitely agree.
And we also had a question come through on Facebook from Ricky. He asks, how did you guys team up? Through NLSC, I guess, but how did you become such buddies? Also, Andrew, you, just like me, from Sweden, coming from pretty much non-basketball countries, for me, football, aka soccer, being everything, and I guess basketball is way down on the list for you as well. So I'll answer the second question first and then bring you in for that that first one. Yeah, I mean, that's a reasonable assumption. Basketball, though it is popular in Australia, it does have a following, and we do have a professional league, the NBL, which is becoming a part of the NBA for more and more players these days, which is cool to see, and the level of play is definitely getting better, although the 90s is still a golden age. Isn't that familiar, Derek? Golden age in basketball. Andrew Gaze, Shane Hill, Mark Bradkey, all those great players. But no, basketball actually is my number one sport. I've never really been into any other sport to the same extent as basketball, so while it is unusual coming from Australia, where it's one of the popular sports, but not as popular as cricket or tennis or Australian rules football, soccer, rugby league, rugby union, etc., yeah, basketball is my number one sport. But that is a reasonable assumption, given that it is not the number one sport in Australia. As far as how we teamed up, yeah, so in 2019, a couple of the other guys who were hosting the show at the time, Ben, aka Arcane, and Kenny, kind of burned out on talking about basketball games and producing content about basketball games, and even playing basketball games for that matter. We weren't enjoying the games as much at the time, playing online as we were, and also it was getting difficult to line up our schedules to record. I reached out to a couple of people to guest host that year. We'd been on hiatus on and off throughout the year. Reached out to you, Derek. We talked about having you on the show at some point and guesting on the show, so I reached out to you about that, and we had been talking for a few years, I think, through the forum at that point, and realised we had some things in common, and once we started recording the podcast together, realised we had even more in common than we thought, and practically the same age, actually. And even though you were guest hosting, quote-unquote guest hosting for a long time, you'd pretty much become the official host, the unofficial official co-host for a while there, and after a while decided, we should make this official, we should bring you on the team and, you know, be co-content creators and collaborate on the content that we do. And of course a friendship developed out of that as well, which is awesome. So that's my take on it, but how do you remember it?
Yeah, so Andrew and I connected on common ground on a lot of basketball related topics on the forums before we ever did one podcast episode together. And whether it was classic hoops or the state of basketball today, or our views on, you know, the state of the 2K franchise, the state of the Live franchise, you know, how we like to see content, how we viewed content, etc. There was a lot of common ground there before we ever even spoke on the phone to each other. And so that's kind of what sparked Andrew to, you know, reach out to me and guest host on the show. And we had a couple really strong episodes together early on, where if you go back and listen to those shows, he talks about me as a guest host. And it actually wasn't that long that I was a guest host, Andrew. If you go back and listen, it was only a few weeks, and then it was calling me, you know, co-host and whatnot, because we realized that it was going to be a long-term thing.
That's right.
And
yes.
Then by us doing this, by us collaborating, by us becoming friends, it made the podcast consistent, right? As far as releasing every single week. We've honestly, it was only due to like sickness and whatnot. We basically released an episode every single week for 5 years now? Yep. 5-6 years.
It's really fun, frankly.
Yeah, we've done hundreds of episodes together. And the other piece of this is that, you know, Andrew and I are playing the newest games, and we're still so into basketball video games. And, you know, we're playing the classics, and now we're connecting on the games and whatnot. And we still share that same passion for basketball gaming and basketball itself. I also want to point out that, this team up has greatly benefited the NLSC as far as content. I think you would agree. Not only a consistent show, but, the top 10 plays of the week, we're almost up on year 5 now. And that's never missed a week. That's been going out every single week for those roughly 5 years. And, there's been hundreds of gameplay videos that have gone up now on the NLSC YouTube, whether it's me playing solo, whether it's me playing with my brother or me playing with somebody in the community, or Andrew and I connecting and going head to head, or playing co-op, etc. The NLSC YouTube was basically dead before this, right? And it kind of got revived, I want to say around 2021 and whatnot. And now just, with the top 10, but also just us connecting on Parsec. One of the first videos that actually went up that revived the channel was an NBA Live 10 video where we were using those alternate Golden State jerseys. Remember, Steven Jackson thumbnail and whatnot. So, it revived the YouTube channel. It revived the podcast. It started a whole Parsec community, and now we have the NLSC Discord and all of that stuff, and we got so much content going up. So I think it's been great. And like you said, one of the best parts of it is that, I gained a friend and you gained a friend, and that there's somebody on the opposite side of the world that, enjoys basketball and basketball gaming, as much as you. So I think it worked out really well.
Absolutely, and I'm very grateful that you were keen to join the team and to create content and be as crazily enthusiastic as I am about creating content about basketball video games, and as I say, reviving the YouTube channel and doing the top 10 every week. And as I said before, I don't regret having to place the top 10 and do the work you do with the top 10, so it's definitely appreciated, and I'm sure the community would agree with me there, because people love the top 10 every week, rightfully so. Another great top 10 this past week, as always. And that is one of the best things that can come out of an online community like the NLSC, developing these genuine friendships with people you've never met in person. And a lot of people sneer at online friendships, but I think that's very short-sighted to, when you can have this genuine friendship with somebody on the other side of the world and share these passions, share these interests like basketball and basketball gaming. And we are on the same page a lot. That might not lead to a lot of contentious debate. We know all the debate shows these days, Derek, have two talking heads going at each other in a very manufactured debate. We don't believe in that. We believe in genuine content, whether it's articles, videos, the podcast, whatever. We don't like the manufactured debate. We don't like phony content. We're just not going to do that. We're not going to do clickbait or any garbage like that. So being on the same page and enjoying talking to each other, enjoying playing games together, it's just been so rewarding.
And we do it because we love it. Right. And I think that comes out in the content, and that comes out in the show. And hopefully our listeners can see that we're authentic on the show, because why else would we be doing this? We're not making money doing this, right? We're doing it because we want to talk about basketball and we want to share that with you. We want to play basketball video games, but we also want to share that content with you. Andrew writes his articles, not just for himself. He wants you to read those articles and get enjoyment out of that, and educate in places where, you're like, hey, I've never heard of that before. I didn't know this was a thing. Right? I didn't know that was happening in basketball video games. I forgot about this roster. I forgot about this transaction, this player that played for this team, or et cetera. And, with the NLSC top 10, it's, that's a community initiative. It's highlighting the community. It's highlighting some of the great games of past and present. And it's a way to get everybody involved, and it's a way to have a shared experience with people from around the world. So, we love what we do, and I hope that shows in the content.
And I'm glad that our chemistry and friendship comes across in the show as well. That's really cool.
Yeah. No, I think that you would know if it was fake, right?
Yeah.
Because listen, I wouldn't be able to do a show with Andrew not missing a week for 5 or 6 years if I hated him, or if I had issues with him. And if I did have issues, that would probably come out on the show, right? Because we're recording for an hour to an hour and a half, and it used to be even more. We used to do 2-hour shows, but we're doing that every single week. So, and also Andrew wouldn't be reaching out to me to connect on video games and vice versa if we didn't have a strong friendship. So we'll play games that we don't ever intend on uploading to YouTube, right? Just to get a quick game in. Or we'll play games to, have a great shared experience and then upload it so you can see it. But this has been great. And what's funny is how fast time flies, because this really has been going on, as far as like this shared experience between us with the NLSC, creating content, co-hosting. It really has been going on for about 6 years now.
Yeah.
And that's just wild to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's wild. These last 5 years in particular have really flown. It's crazy. But another sign of our friendship, Derek, is how often I'll just hit you up for a game, and you'll say, what do you want to play? And I don't know. You choose something, and you don't get annoyed. So I appreciate that.
You usually like what I choose. So that works out because we have very similar tastes in games. Though I will say that one time I was like, hey, want to throw on NBA 2K25? And Andrew was like, no. So I want to point something out with that. Andrew dropped 2K25 as fast as he dropped 2K24. And what's funny is I was listening to the first impressions episode for 2K25, and I think that you thought you were going to stick with it a little bit longer.
I did,
right?
Yeah.
But you definitely dropped it pretty fast. And you know what I think it is I just think you have all these other games you want to play now, and you don't feel like you have to play the newest game. And, you're on 2K14 and you're on 2K6. I got you into 2K9, Andrew. You were loving it, right? Like that's a new one for you that's in your rotation and not the current game. And you're playing 2K15 with created Terry Hansen, and, you're connecting with me on Classic. So, I'm not surprised you dropped it as early as you did. I think that NBA 2K25, at least for me, is the strongest game on PS5 gen.
Oh, agreed.
For the 2Ks.
Objectively, I think it is, yeah.
But yeah, I still prefer other titles. I'm still spending more time on 2K16, 2K17, 2K14, connecting with you, playing 2K9, etc. So yeah, I see why you did. But yeah, how about 2K9, Andrew?
I'm enjoying it, yeah. Enjoying it more than 2K8. Had a fun session with 90s All-Stars, East versus West. Did get screwed over. Posted in our Discord. Did get screwed over with a very cheap 5-second call thanks to that post-basket cut, which was very weird. Never had that happen before, but that was a bit annoying. But nevertheless, I'm enjoying that game. I think it's probably going to be the next one that I do a Wayback Wednesday on. I like to do at least one in-depth game retrospective a month. I'm trying to get that up to 2, but I'm making sure that I have at least one retro game review each month, and 2K9 might be the one for April.
So finally, Renee, who asked us to do this Q&A, asks, have we ever met an NBA player in person? So I met, the first player I actually ever met for an NBA player was D Brown. I met him at a local mall. He was doing a signing. They also had they put a hoop up. It was like a hoop it up type setup in the mall, and he played horse with somebody and threw down a couple dunks, which wowed the crowd and all of that stuff. But I just remember, him signing one of my basketball cards, and the pen was hidden in his hand. His hands were so big, Andrew, D Brown. And if you actually go back and watch footage of D Brown, you can see that. And actually commentators talked about it at times. And I think it helped him as a ball handler. It helped him as a pickpocket and whatnot. But D Brown is actually the first NBA player that I ever met. And he was super nice when I met him. I also met Doc Rivers, so not a player. He was actually coaching at the time. I shook his hand. I also met and shook hands with Ray Allen at the time with the Celtics, and I also met Brian Scalabrine. It was all actually at the same event. Because my friend was a personal chef with a lady who was married to somebody high up in Nike. So what ended up happening is we got excellent seats and backstage passes and whatnot to a Celtics game that we went to. I also walked by Dikembe Mutombo. I didn't actually meet him, but I walked by Dikembe Mutombo in New York City. But yeah, I think that is pretty much it for me.
That's really cool, and obviously played a big role in D Brown becoming one of your favorite players, I'm sure. Was it heartbreaking when he got traded to the Raptors in 98?
Yeah, it was. But you kind of had a feeling that they were moving in a different direction. The Celtics were under Patino. and whatnot. And I think that while he did leave the Celtics at that time, I was still such a big fan of the team, a big fan of the roster, a big fan of the new players that they picked up, and I was hopeful for the future. So it didn't kill me, but yeah, it did hurt to see him in a different uniform.
And speaking of mixed feelings, Ray Allen, kind of a villain now, but you did meet him at one point when he was a Celtic.
Yeah, exactly. It was a short exchange. It was just I was able to shake his hand, and he was basically just, hey. Like, didn't really say too much. Same with Doc Rivers. But yeah, the D Brown experience was a little bit more personal.
So obviously, living in Australia, not many opportunities to meet NBA players. Shaq was over here, I think a couple of years ago now, was doing some meet and greets. Kenny actually got to meet him and said it was kind of an underwhelming experience, not much of a meet and greet at all, kind of 5-second photo opportunity, shake hands, maybe a word or two. Not that exciting, so didn't really miss out on much there. When I was in New York for the NBA Live 08 community event, they put us up at the same swanky hotel as the NBA players, or the draftees, I should say, the players about to get drafted to the NBA. So the night of the draft, I'm coming out of my room, going to the lift, the elevator, to go down and meet the rest of the guys there and get prepared to go out to dinner and then to the draft. And doors open, there's Greg Oden, who's about to go number 1. And I'm 6'3", Derek, as I've said before, and I've never felt shorter than I have standing next to Greg Oden at 7 foot. Didn't really talk to him, obviously. The lift was full and wasn't about to strike up a conversation. He was there with his handlers, but just kind of a bit of a nod, hey, how you going? Yes, I recognise you, but I'm not going to bother you, kind of thing. But yeah, I guess that's my experience meeting an NBA player, or soon-to-be NBA player. But yeah, just towered over me.
Same thing when I walked by Dikembe Mutombo. Felt like I was up to his waist. And I'm tall too. I'm 6'2". And he just absolutely towered over me.
So yeah, that will do it for this Q&A. And Derek, I'm pretty keen to do another sometime. So throw it out there to our listeners. Keep sending in these questions.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And thanks for all the topic suggestions lately. There's actually a few more that we're going to have to center episodes around. But yeah, if you have any topic suggestions for the show, don't be shy. Ask us and, we'll try to feature it.
So that has indeed brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you again for your questions. And please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us. And of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center, and of course keep a look to the NLSC itself, NBA-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.